I should have shuttered you fraudulent gangsters forever when I had the chance. You know what? I'm going to put an end to this madness now. Right now.
Hey Ghost Heads, it's Devin from Channeling Spirits. The original Ghostbusters was lightning in a bottle. It took 5 years to convince the original cast to do a sequel. After a lackluster second film, hopes of a third film were frozen in development hell. 20 years later, a video game was released starring the original team of Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Ernie Hudson. In addition, Annie Potts, William Atherton, and Max von Sydow returned to voice characters they had previously portrayed. The game was touted as being written by the original screenwriters, Aykroyd and Ramis. 15 years later, we've now seen the release of not one, but two Ghostbusters films. So, is the 2009 video game still canon? Dan Aykroyd stated in multiple interviews he considered the game the third installment of the series.
It looks more like the sequel than a game. It tells the third story.
In Game Informer 176, he also stated, "If you have an appetite for the third movie, then the video game is it." It's clear he believed a third Ghostbusters film wasn't going to happen, but this was a continuation of the Ghostbusters story. But in July 2017 at the San Diego Comic-Con, Ivan Reitman declared the 2009 video game was no longer canon. This may have been before his son, Jason, had even started writing a script for Afterlife, and the direction of the franchise was still uncertain. Considering Ghostbusters was always Dan Aykroyd's brainchild, it's odd to think Ivan would be dictating the direction of canon. We know Gary Gruberson says,
there hasn't been a ghost sighting in 30 years.
Ghostbusters the video game takes place during November 1991, and Ghostbusters Afterlife occurs during June 2021, which is almost exactly 30 years. However, we also know Phoebe is 12.
No, I'm 12.
Meaning she was born in 2009, and she mentions,
It happened 20 years before we were born.
Which would make it exactly 1989, when Ghostbusters 2 took place. A news report in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire also alludes to the second film.
We haven't seen the Ghostbusters cause this much damage since the Statue of Liberty debacle of 1989.
So the return of Stay Puft and Central Park being turned into a cemetery were either less destructive than the Statue of Liberty taking a stroll, or they never happened. At the end of the video game, Ray mentions that business was going to slow down.
Looks like things are going to be a little slow around here for a while.
Which he also echoed in Afterlife.
Oh, well, look, when we started, busting ghosts was a gas. Economy was good, Reagan years. People believed in us. And things got slow, hauntings got thin. Venkman thought we did our job too well.
Peter had talked about opening franchises.
No, of course not. Lewis has been scouting locations, and I think we're prepared to offer a potentially lucrative Ghostbusters franchise in either Chicago, Los Angeles, or Cincinnati. I'll pick.
And in the IDW comic series, which takes place after the game, the Rookie is sent to Chicago, coincidentally where Callie was living. Maybe this was one more way Egon was trying to watch over her. But business kept going, though not like it had been. Perhaps they realized some upgrades weren't working as well or were needed. One interesting feature of the Hasbro's Plasma Series Spangler Neutrona Wand is the ability to switch between 4 modes of the video game Proton Pack.
What is that? That's something totally different.
While it is physically based on the thrower Phoebe uses in Afterlife, the film only showed it firing a proton stream. Maybe some of the other upgrades did survive.
It is alive.
We know they continued to enhance the gear, adding a taser to the PKE meter, a Polaroid output on the Ecto goggles, and a remote trap vehicle. The Ecto goggles in Afterlife and Frozen Empire are used in conjunction with the RTV and the FPV drone trap, respectively. This seems like a continuation of how the PKE meter and paragoggles were used in tandem in the video game.
The paragoggles are linked directly to your active PKE meter. This lets you see otherwise undetectable phenomena while you track it.
In the Paranormal Research Center, we see Winston's team testing out a traditional slime blower, meaning they decided not to keep it integrated into the pack, possibly because it was unnecessary or simply too heavy.
Oh, I always hated this part of the business.
We also see several ghosts contained in what appears to be simple glass enclosures.
Why don't they escape?
Proton fields.
This is likely a larger variation of the paranormal containment research tank that initially contained Slimer in 1991. But what about the containment unit? While the 1984 film had a smaller red panel, the 2009 game upgraded to a larger design almost like the animated series. By 2021, they clearly went back to the familiar red panel. Considering the containment unit was shut down again in 1991,
So either there was a mass escape from Rikers,
Or someone shut down our containment grid again.
the bulky design could have been destroyed, leading it to be rebuilt like the original. The shutdown also explains how Slimer and the librarian ghost, despite being captured in the game, are still roaming around New York. We also know Egon was working on ways to contain larger entities in 1991. The Super Slammer was added to the Ectomobile, making it Ecto-1B. But even Egon wasn't sure it could contain Stay Puft.
Against the minions of a god, that was never the intent. But in theory, I suppose it could. But a muon trap of this capacity has never been used or even tried before.
While Egon wasn't able to see if the massive muon trap could contain Gozer, this encounter may have been what inspired the trap field. Regardless if it was the Ecto-1A or 1B, the Cadillac was changed back to its original design, but with an added gunner seat.
Oh, it has a gunner seat?
After the 1A and 1B, we see the Ecto-C introduced, a motorcycle with a sidecar.
Egon!
The Ecto-C takes Ray, Phoebe, and Podcast to the main branch of the New York Public Library. In reality, the library has 4 floors with no basement. The entrance on 5th Avenue leads to the first floor, with the famous Rose Reading Room on the 3rd. The first film's basement was filmed in the Los Angeles Central Library. In the video game, they explain it was Ivo Shandor who actually added renovations, including the library's subterranean floors.
Let me guess. He did some renovations on the public library building on 5th.
Frozen Empire echoes that the library has more floors beneath it.
Upstairs is just for show. Gilded research rooms where struggling actors can Twitch stream and buy crypto. The old library is below.
The main branch also has its iconic lion statues out front.
Did you know these 2 regal kittens actually have names? Patience and Fortitude.
It was actually Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia who gave them their names.
I spent an hour last night in my bedroom talking to Fiorello LaGuardia, and he's been dead for 40 years.
Patience and fortitude were the qualities he felt New Yorkers would need to survive the economic depression of the 1930s. Patience sits to the south of the main steps, while fortitude guards the north. When the Ghostbusters returned in 1991, Patience was missing.
Maybe, but didn't there used to be 2 lions out here?
2 Class 5 animators, Cruster and Crusto, also destroyed Fortitude. By 2024, the lions had been restored until Phoebe pulverized Patience. Roger Delacour, the head librarian, reminds Ray he has a restraining order.
No, Dr. Stantz! No, you are forbidden from coming within 50 feet of this library. Good to see you, buddy. Been a long time, huh?
Considering Peter, Egon, and Ray did relatively little damage to the library during their first visit, this order only makes sense if they return in 1991. Another change in the New York landscape is the addition of the One World Trade Center in 2024. In Ghostbusters 2, the World Trade Center towers are prominently seen, while the video game has them conspicuously missing. From a thematic standpoint, Ghostbusters the video game adds more depth to the characters. When Phoebe asks Ray,
Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a ghost?
Every day of my life, dear.
Really?
Sure.
Similar to his wish to visit the ghost world.
Cross-dimensional portal from the 5th to the 4th. A whole world of ghosts. Something I've dreamt about since college. It's all in the Monarchia Demonium. Fantastic ghost world.
In 1984, Walter Peck was an EPA agent from the 3rd District. 40 years later, he is somehow the mayor of New York. This jump makes a lot more sense when you realize how closely Peck was working with the then mayor, Jock Mulligan. He put him in charge of Peacock.
PCOC, Paranormal Contracts Oversight Commission. And my first official act is going to be suspending you clowns' operating license.
Walter Peck's grudge against the Ghostbusters has more depth when you realize he's been trying to shut them down for decades, not just a few days 40 years ago.
Shut this off. Shut these all off. I'm shutting down your containment grid for good.
Now just hold on.
The last time you tried to shut us down, you created a cross-rip into another dimension.
It also adds to Ivo Shandor's backstory. According to Afterlife, Ivo Shandor was born in 1855. Shortly after, in the 1860s, his family built Shandor Castle.
The Shandors owned this island for generations. The castle was built in the 1860s. Ivo Shandor used it as a refuge, a lab, and a temple for he and other cult members to worship Gozer.
Ivo's first plan may have taken place in Shandor Castle. Within its walls, he built an orrery.
It's an orrery, a device typically used for predicting planetary alignment. In this case, it appears to actually be aligning dimensions.
He may have been hoping to align dimensions and summon Gozer, but instead he brought over and trapped a juvenile Slore. In Ghostbusters 2, Egon theorized that psychomagnetheric slime had materialized because of the negativity of thousands of New Yorkers.
Negative human emotions are materializing in the form of a viscous psychoreactive plasm with explosive supernormal potential.
Ghostbusters, the video game, clarified it was actually Shandor who siphoned the black slime from a Slore and pumped it into the city, creating the river of slime seen in the film. And while it's possible the anger of 3 million people could coalesce,
I beg your pardon, 3,000,001.
Hey.
The video game's explanation helps connect the first two films. We know Vigo the Carpathian used the River of Slime to magnify his power, which is likely what Shandor hoped Gozer would do. Speaking of slime, Frozen Empire shows a variety of colors mentioned in the video game.
There's blue slime, pink slime, yellow slime, but every ghost in here is coated with black slime.
Ivo's next plan involved modifying existing buildings to construct a mandala to funnel psychokinetic energy.
That's what I was researching when Gozer attacked me. Shandor's architecture firm was involved in a number of projects around town in the late early 1900s.
But why? For what purpose? Shandor seemed to believe Gozer would be weak when it arrived, hence the need for a river of slime or mandala.
You know, I think you helped to make that clearer. So this was the gizmo that's supposed to feed energy to the destructor form?
Sometime after November 11th, 1918, Shandor began enacting a new plan.
After the First World War, Shandor decided that society was too sick to survive. And he wasn't alone. He had close to 1,000 followers when he died. They conducted rituals up on the roof. Bizarre rituals intended to bring about the end of the world, and now it looks like it may actually happen.
According to his electronic entry in Tobin's Spirit Guide, on June 6, 1920, Ivo started a secret society of,
let me guess, Gozer worshippers.
Rather than modifying existing structures, he decided to build
a huge superconductive antenna that was designed and built expressly for the purpose of pulling in and concentrating spiritual turbulence.
He mined selenium from a site in Oklahoma, and in 1923, 550 Central Park West was completed. The following year, Edmund the Collector Hoover, a fellow Gozer worshipper, seduced Eleanor Twitty for the Gozerian Codex. The cult conducted rituals up on the roof, but never brought about the end of the world. For whatever reason, Shandor left Manhattan and started work on another contingency. In 1927, the Shandor Mining Company was established at the site where he originally obtained selenium. A year later, the surrounding town of Somerville was founded. Carved inside the mine were a series of years when great destruction happened. These appear to be moments when Gozer can cross over. Upon discovering this, Shandor prepared for the next window.
1945. One by one, miners who had worked for years began leaping down the mine shaft to their death. They called it the Shandorian Curse.
Despite the sacrifice, Gozer still never came. Afterwards, Shandor was entombed, but it's unclear if he was truly dead. This is when Shandor Castle was submerged into the Hudson River.
The night the last Shandor died, there was a huge tidal surge, and the river just swallowed the island whole. Shandor consecrated the island to Gozer, and the ghost world reclaimed it.
It wasn't until the next window in 1984 that Gozer would finally return to our world. With the Traveler banished back to its own dimension, Shandor's spirit began enacting his own plan. Months before the events of the video game, he possessed Mayor Mulligan. He lured the last of his bloodline, Alyssa Selwyn, to channel energy for his own destructor form.
This is all making sense. Alyssa must have inadvertently triggered the mandala because she has Shandor blood.
Crossing the streams closed the gate to the ghost world, but it didn't destroy Shandor. Instead, his spirit lingered, looking for another opportunity to return. Shandor's betrayal and incompetence in 1991 explains why Gozer literally tore him apart when it returned in 2021.
How he earned the title The Destroyer is beyond me.
The Ivo Shandor of Ghostbusters Afterlife also has a look eerily similar to his video game counterpart. However, this may be merely a coincidence, as makeup designer Arjun Tootin explains.
I basically looked at hairstyles of that era. I did one concept design, only one, and he immediately signed off on it. That was it. I gave him the little beard, and I think I looked at Charles Dickens and stuff, anything from that time.
Stopping Shandor became an obsession for Egon, which makes sense considering he faced Gozer twice, and the first time paralyzed him with fear.
Sorry, Venkman. I'm terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought.
With his fellow Busters doubting him, Spangler took their gear and drove off to Oklahoma, determined to halt Armageddon. In the end, Egon was right, as he often is.
The atomic weight of cobalt, 58.9.
But when Gozer returned once more, it no longer asked those that approached it to choose the form of their destructor. In fact, it remained in its traveler form throughout all of Ghostbusters Afterlife, so it seems Gozer changing its appearance is less a requirement and more of a courtesy or a game for the god. Ray had theorized it was forced to take the form of Stay Puft when it returned to our dimension.
When the necromantic shockwave summoned Gozer back to our plane, why didn't he assume a more effective destructor form immediately? I mean, the Marshmallow Man is scary, sure, but there has to be a better way to destroy the world. It's simple. When he enters our plane of existence, he must be locked into that form from our first encounter. One destructor form per god per dimension. I like it. Sounds like the kind of symmetry these things tend to operate on. Hey, so maybe I didn't choose such a bad destructor after all, huh?
But clearly his theory was incorrect. While they were allowed to choose in the first film, by Afterlife, Gozer decided they would perish. The 2021 film also adds to the lore that the Terror Dogs are not only required to open the gate, but their presence is directly tied to Gozer's. When Zuul was temporarily trapped, the Destructor is diminished in form and strength. Since the Terror Dogs hadn't been captured in 1991, Gozer could still appear. But neither the video game nor Afterlife explain the existence of the Mini-Puffs. These minions are clearly independent of Gozer and possibly ripples of its upcoming emergence. Though they are seemingly destroyed when Gozer is trapped, they keep coming back. When the original boys in gray arrive in Afterlife, they prepare to cross the streams as if they've done it several times before. This makes more sense if you consider they've survived crossing the streams once with Gozer and a second time against Shandor's destructor form.
I never thought I'd say this again. Cross the streams!
Ghostbusters the video game adds a tremendous amount to the lore, history, and story. It's unlikely the films will ever overtly mention the video game, but a case can be made that the events in 1991 still happened. At times it seems the films may be alluding to the game.
What about Gozer? I thought you built this all for him.
I have built this temple for you.
Or maybe they are simply coincidences.
I am a god.
We eat gods for breakfast.
Ultimately, no one working on the new films has ever addressed the video game's canon. It sits in a liminal space where the viewer can decide whether they want it in their own headcanon or not. So, what do you think? Is the video game the third part of the story, or has the third film replaced it? If you like this video and think we deserve it,
Too much, you think?
No, I liked it.
please subscribe. I'm Devin from Channeling Spirits, and thanks for watching.